The IRS has collected over $1 billion in past due taxes this year, and they're aggressively targeting more taxpayers. Don't wait until the IRS comes knocking. Our team is here to help you resolve your tax debts before things escalate. Every tax situation is unique, and so is our approach. We tailor solutions to fit your specific needs, giving you the personalized attention you deserve. The IRS has resumed collection enforcement. Don't wait until it's too late. Our team can help you resolve your tax issues before liens, levies, or passport restrictions kick in. Behind on filing taxes? We specialize in getting you back on track by filing past returns and negotiating with the IRS. Does the IRS claim that you owe money that you don't have? We fight to lower your tax debt to an amount that you can afford. United Tax Fix. Expert help, personalized service, and the peace of mind you deserve.
Call 800-852-6985. That's 800-852-6985.
Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishuttle with you. You know, here at the show, we get a lot of interesting books written by a lot of interesting people. For me, this is one of the more fascinating books I've read. The writer is Simon Chokwisky, and the book is Gambler's Dharma, Sports Betting with Vedic Astrology. And we are lucky enough to have Simon on the phone with us right now. Simon, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, great. Our pleasure. Just for some background for people out there who are not familiar with it, what is Vedic astrology?
Well, it's just what it sounds like. It's a type of astrology that's mainly practiced in India, and typically it was just for the kings and queens in the old days to help them figure out when is the best time to go into battle, when is the best time to get married. And, one unique thing we as gamblers understand is that timing is very important. You know, you have good days, you have bad days, you have good weeks, good years, and bad years sometimes. And in the old days, people used to wonder, why does that happen? You know, why is it that sometimes someone who is much less skilled than I am can beat me, and on some days, you know, I can take on the world, whether it's at cards or whatever your pursuit. And so they figured out that there was some correlation between what's happening up in the heavens and whether you were having a good day or not. And so that's Vedic astrology. It's the astrology of ancient India that was used to time major events.
You touch on something that I want to ask you. You know, these techniques, you say, have been used for thousands of years and in every country of the world. Are you surprised that more people haven't used these techniques with regard to sports and betting?
Yes and no. So in the old days, any science like this or art or superstition, whatever you want to call it, it wouldn't survive until this day if it didn't have some usefulness, some effectiveness. So as I said, in the old days, both in the West and the East, every king, every important person, I should say, had a consultant. Just as today we have financial consultants, we have consultants, real estate agents. Well, there were astrologers. And so they would ask their astrologers, hey, when should I do this? Or is this a good person to be in business with? And if they were wrong, typically what happened was, especially if you're a king, you didn't fire them. You actually banished them. They were done. Their career was over. Or at worst case scenario, they got their head cut off. So if the stuff didn't work, astrology would have disappeared a long time ago. Now, the problem is that it's a complex science, and there are a lot of charlatans out there, and a lot of knuckleheads like me who, get it wrong and miss stuff, and but we still try our best. Mm-hmm. So I think I understand why it's not used today, because it's very difficult. And another thing is, in the old days, the best minds, like the best mathematicians, the most brilliant scientists, they were doing astrology, the Albert Einsteins of the world. Whereas today, there are many more things that brilliant minds can do. They can go into science. They can go into, building rockets and so on. So we've got more average minds doing astrology, and as a result, it's maybe gone down. Mm-hmm. And so that doesn't surprise me.
When you're talking about sports, what are some of the aspects of a game or a team that you look at when using astrology in sports betting?
A sport is a contest. It's a battle. It's a win or a loss. It's black and white. Well, sometimes there's a tie. And more fundamentally, a contest is a space-time event. That means it begins at a particular place at a particular time, and then it has a lifespan. It lasts an hour or two, or if it's baseball, it can last forever theoretically. But and then typically it has an ending, just like a human being. So if astrology can be applied to a human being, we're also space-time events. We're born in a certain place in a certain time. We have a lifespan, and then, we expire. So it's the same thing. A sporting contest is just like a human being. And if it works for human beings to be able to tell you, hey, you're going to be successful, you're going to do well, or you're not, then it should work for telling us whether the home team or the favorite team should win. So it's just like a battle, except these days the battles happen on the gridiron more often than on the battlefield.
What's intriguing about the book is how you bring the reader along during the process of creating a chart for a particular team or game. And at the start of this process is something called Dharma or Dharma types. What is that, and why is that so important when creating your charts?
Well, and I hate to get philosophical here, but Dharma is your right path. It's your purpose in life. It's your calling. And if it's not your calling to be a speculator, to be a gambler, to be in this field, then my contention is no matter how good you get at techniques, no matter how much you study, it's not really the right thing for you. And you should know that before you get into it. My mentor taught me that the astrologer's job is to put themselves out of business. That means that you take a client and you teach them, you help them find their purpose in life. You help them find their calling. And when you do that, then they don't need you anymore. Your job is done, right? And I've said this before, where I think that's also a doctor's job, traditionally, to take a client, teach them good health, how to eat, how to take care of their body, so that they don't need the doctor anymore. That's a utopian kind of world. But when it comes to gambling, I'm sure you've seen people like this who are well-intentioned, they study, but they're just not, somehow it's not for them. Mm-hmm. And this goes for everything. For boxing, people try to be boxers, but they're just not. And so my job, first of all, is to find out, is speculation right for you? Is it in the stars for you, if you will? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So,
and we start from there. And some people from very early on, they know that's their path, and that's great. And then my job is to help them get better, to help them find the better times to go to the casino, the better times to enter that tournament. But we know that they're in alignment. Mm-hmm. And so that's what that chapter is about.
Another term you use when analyzing a game is something called victory houses. Now, how does the idea of victory houses relate to your analysis?
So in astrology, there's something called houses of the horoscope. There are 12 houses, and each team gets 6 houses that are good for victory, and another 6 that are not good. So it's very simple. When the planets are in the victory, what I call the victory houses, mm-hmm. That's my term, by the way, for one team, and they're not, and by extension, they're not for the other team, then it shows which team is stronger. Mm-hmm. It's pretty straightforward.
By the way, it's a great term, because when I saw victory houses, okay, I need to know this if I'm going to win at sports betting using astrology. I see the word victory, and I'm attracted to it.
Well, I got to tell you, I appreciate you saying that, because when I took this on, my wife and everybody said, who are you writing this book for? There's only so many astrologers, and there's only so many people who bet, and you're writing it for these niches. And I said, you know what? There's something in my heart that's just driving me to do this, and so there it is. So I'm very heartened that you're taking this to heart yourself.
it's one of those things, it's ancient wisdom that's been around for so long, and it's been used around the world, and it's just, I'm surprised that more people aren't embracing this it's from our ancestors, really.
Well, I'll tell you, in the 60s, there was an astrologer in India. His name was Krishnamurti. Mm-hmm. And he got so good to where he had a line around his house like people were trying to buy an iPhone. Like people would camp out for 2 or 3 days, and the line would stretch around the neighborhood a couple of times. And part of the reason how he got so good was he would play cards. And he would test his techniques by playing cards, and he'd see which times, and he was a decent card player, but, he wasn't the best. Mm-hmm. And he would play during times that were good for him, and then he would have his son, so he'd calculate this beforehand, and he'd have his son call him as soon as the time turned bad to give him an excuse to leave the table. I know that's a crummy thing to do, but, he was testing this. And so, like at 12:31, his son would call and he'd say, "Oh, sorry, guys, I got to take my chips and take off." And he got so good that people wouldn't play with him anymore. So he had to start losing on purpose. Mm-hmm. And this is a true story, by the way. This is, you can verify this yourself. His name was Krishnamurti, and he developed a system to where he could time even down to the hour, which period is favorable for you, which period isn't. And, I'm not as good as, I study his system and I try to follow along, but there are brilliant people like that who have got this stuff down really to a science. So yeah, I'm surprised too, but, also it's very difficult. Like I said, it was only the best minds in the old days who would do this stuff. And these days, not so much.
Okay. Now, we understand the terms Dharma types, and we get the concept of victory houses. What is your next step when trying to determine the outcome of a game using Vedic astrology?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the book, there are a total of 9 techniques. And so the victory houses is one technique, and that's how I first sort of got into it. But the victory houses move very slowly. So basically any game that starts within an hour or so is going to have the same configuration. And so the victory house technique was working a lot, but it was also not working some of the time. And I thought, why isn't it working? And so there are more discrete techniques that depend on an exact start time. And when I gave predictions last week, I noted that if this game starts within a couple of minutes of when it's supposed to, then we expect this outcome. And the more I did this, the more I found that even seconds can make a difference. And so timing, again, back to this idea that timing is everything. And if you begin playing, or if a game begins at a certain time, a certain outcome is expected. But if it begins a minute later, that outcome could be 180. It can be totally different. It could be for the other team.
How much of a change?
So I figured out some techniques to figure that out.
How much of a change in time is if it happens within an hour, it's pretty much the same, or can it be changed from minute to minute, or how is that determined?
Honestly, it's from minute to minute. And as I mentioned earlier, the most recent example of this was Cleveland-New York game, baseball, last game of their series, where, in my opinion, if that game had started 1 minute earlier, so if you're the manager and you know that you're supposed to start within this time, that Cleveland would have won, not New York. And by the way, this isn't, I know this sounds crazy and radical, but we spent 8 years under the Reagan administration having his astrologer time absolutely every meeting, every, airplane takeoff and landing according to this principle. And his assistant even had a stopwatch, and he cued Reagan when it was time to begin a press conference, when it was time to begin a meeting. And his whole presidency ran according to this principle. So a very conservative man, but yet someone who understood, or at least went along with, this principle that to everything, if you want to succeed at something, starting at the right time really gives you a leg up.
It's amazing.
So sometimes it's even minutes and seconds.
It's amazing how precise that is when you're talking about time, how 1 minute can change an outcome of something so important.
Well, and it's hard to believe because you'll never know, right?
Yeah.
You'll never know if what the other outcome would have been, except that I've tracked games that have begun at very similar times, maybe a minute apart, and the chart is just different by a minute, and the outcome is the opposite. So I actually have, I have thousands of charts that I've looked at, and I have that data. And this speaks to the question of when most scientists think about astrology and they debunk it, they go, well, look at twins. Sometimes twins lead radically different lives, but they were born just minutes apart. And it's true. They're right. And so sometimes minutes can make a difference, and sometimes twins lead very similar lives. Mm-hmm. And in that case, it didn't make a difference. Mm-hmm.
I guess connected with time is also the location of a sporting event. How much emphasis do you put on the home team versus the visitor when you're creating your chart?
Right. Well, it's 10:45 where I am, and it's before noon. But if you were in Tokyo, it would be night, right? So location is very much linked with time. And as Einstein taught us, space and time are really the same thing. And that's why we call it space-time. So location and time are the two components that are the most important. So yes, absolutely, you need an accurate location for a correct horoscope and an accurate start time.
We talked about this with regard to location. We do another show, Turnpike Sports, and you gave some amazing predictions. I benefited from one of your predictions, by the way. Thank you, Seattle, and thank you, Simon.
Awesome, Dave. That's great.
Yeah, there you go. But when you talk about location, and we talked at another time, you mentioned individual players will perform differently depending on when and where they play. And this led us to be thinking, would it be beneficial for an athlete or a team to consult an astrologer before he signs with a particular team? Do you know of any athletes who actually consulted with astrologers before joining a team?
That is a great question. No, I personally don't. I work with, I don't work with the kings and queens in the world typically, although I've seen a couple of Hollywood, celebrities and whatnot, but typically I work with mom and pop clients. But in my opinion, the $100 or whatever you spend to consult with an astrologer before making a multi-million-dollar move or trade is worth it. It's well worth it because yes, different locations will affect you. So I think even in playing cards, if you go to a tournament in Vegas and you do well, you may go to a tournament in Jersey or somewhere else and just stink up the room. And part of that could be related to, it may not be, but it's possible that it's related to the fact that in Jersey, you just have bad lines. You've got bad stuff going on there, bad juju for you, so that you don't do as well. And we can identify that.
Oh, great. I'm in Jersey. I feel terrible now.
No. It's individual. So
I know.
You get. By the way, anyone can do this for themselves. There's a site you can go to. I don't know if it's okay to refer. It's not my site. This is a general site, so it's not a plug. It's a site called astro.com. You go to free horoscopes, and then you click on Astro Click Travel. Because typically we use this to figure out where people can travel and have a good time and where, areas they should avoid. Click on that, enter your data, and then you'll see all of your lines across the globe. And then anywhere you click, it'll interpret it for you, and it'll tell you, hey, this place is great for business, this place is great for relationships. Uh-huh. Like, just a really quick example, I have a client, or I had a client, and her Venus line went through Portland, Maine. And I said, look, Portland, Maine is great for love for you. And she started laughing. I said, why are you laughing? She said, my husband's from Portland, Maine.
Wow.
And she had never been there. But her husband, love, had come to her from Portland, Maine. And likewise, where you have a Jupiter line is where you're lucky. So when it comes to gambling, you want to look to where your Jupiter line is. Mm-hmm. And so when you find that, Go to those places, try it out, see what happens. I've done it. For me, it's through Puerto Rico. And years ago, when I landed in Puerto Rico, I didn't speak Spanish, nothing. And this is a true story. I was on the street corner, and I didn't have any car or anything. There was this guy on a motorcycle. I tapped him on the shoulder. It was a red light. I said, "How much you want for that bike?" He said, $800. I pulled it out, paid him. He got off the bike, gave me his helmet, and gave me the little thing, the registration. I got on the bike. By the time the light turned green, I was off.
Wow.
And stuff like that happened for me over there like crazy. Like I would knock on a door and people would say, "Come in, we've been waiting for you. We need," I was a physical trainer at the time. "We need somebody to help us run the gym." Intercontinental Hotel, I became the manager. Like that.
Wow, boy.
So where your Jupiter line is where you tend to be lucky. And you can find that. It's very easy. It's not difficult. Any of your listeners can find it.
Oh, wow. That's amazing story. I never read a book like the one you've written, Gambler's Dharma, Sports Betting with Vedic Astrology, that uses astrology and its technique for sports betting. I gotta ask you, has this book been well received in the astrology world? Have there been astrologers saying, "Hey, you shouldn't be using our techniques for gambling purposes," or has it been well received within the industry?
There's a small percentage of astrologers who are a little bit above it all and a little bit high and mighty. And actually I understand where they're coming from, because this is a spiritual science. It's meant to empower people, right? And they have this association that speculation is somehow disempowering. And like I said at the beginning, it can be. If it's not your calling, it can be. You can lose your house, in your mortgage. But it's also gotten some great reviews from some professional astrology magazines. So yes, generally speaking, it's been well received.
Well, we're running out of time, and I want to thank you, Simon, for coming on and discussing this very interesting book you've written. The name of the book is Gambler's Dharma, Sports Betting with Vedic Astrology by Simon Chalkwisky. And check out his website at spirittype.com. Simon, thanks for coming on.
It's been my pleasure, guys. Take care.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on The Turnpike.